This morning, we are privileged and honored to have one of our favorites back, Reverend Mitch Austin from California. And his talk today is Embracing Your Inner Edge. And I'm hoping that that means we don't have to be on edge, because I think most of us are on edge anyway. Mitch was raised in the science of mind philosophy and has been a Centers for Spiritual Living licensed practitioner since 2012. And he became a licensed minister in 2023. And he's been speaking to spiritual centers for the last 10 years. We welcome you, Mitch. We're glad to have you, and we're eager to hear what you have to say. You are on, man.
Fantastic. Good to see everyone. So glad to be back. And it is a beautiful day. It's a gorgeous day here as well. And any day that we can come together in community is a beautiful day. I will also add, I'm now the senior minister for the Sierra Center for Spiritual Living. So this is my office that you're seeing right now. So yeah, it's very exciting and just more opportunities to serve, which now is my aligned career and passion project, which is, I think, where I was trying to get for a long time. I also want to say Happy International Women's Day. Who knew it was International Women's Day today? Yeah, yeah. And it's really, the reason, men are like, why don't we have a Men's Day? Well, it's more about just promoting equality for women. There's still a lot of women who can't get educated, hold jobs, have property. So, still a lot of work to do in the world. And we can all add to it just with our consciousness of intention and harmony and peace for all. So, I love the song Higher Love because don't we need a higher love right now? Because I think a higher love is going to be the solution. We need a spiritual solution for these uncertain times. And yet, in uncertain times, we can see more clearly the handiwork of spirit in the what comes out of the uncertainty. And of course, we're seeing things shift on a level we never imagined was possible. We're seeing old agreements either get upended or ignored in the world. We're seeing laws get reversed. I just heard in the state of Kansas, anyone who's transgender has to turn in their driver's license. And that's interesting to me because I'm a transgender man, fun fact. So I'm just imagining turning in my Mitch license and getting my Michelle license. Like, how many confused people would there be when I'm handing that to people? So, just a lot of chaos that's pushing us to our inner edge of uncomfortability, where it feels dark and uncertain. And yet, when nothing is certain, everything is possible. And that's the gift of uncertainty, is that we get to take what looks unformed or uncertain and bring new shape and new life to it. And we know from this teaching, and when you're here long enough, we know our thoughts and beliefs shape this fine work of spirit. And so our inner work is to be not only on our edge, but also in our peace. And so it's this tension of opposites that we're having to manage within our own interior. We're feeling like exploding, but at the same time, we want to be in our peace, right? So there's this tension of opposites that we're being asked to walk with and to start to move our feet in courageous ways to live our values and embody the peace that we want in the world, the harmony we want in the world, the love we want in the world. And in today's talk, I'm going to share with you someone who lived their values and stood on their own inner edge and pushed past the fear to bring greater connection, understanding, and unity in the world. See, even though we're living in uncertain times, there's something, I think we can all sense there's something being birthed. Like there's something big coming through the birth canal of our collective being from this disorder and chaos. Friedrich Nietzsche put it this way: you must have you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. And it's my deep hope that there's a dancing star of the world being born through all of this difficulty and change. And so the title of today's talk is Embracing Your Inner Edge. And we're going to talk about why that's important, what our inner edge is, and some ideas around how we can step into our response versus our reaction in a world that just keeps trying to trigger us. I don't know if anyone is avoiding CNN, constantly negative news. I'm avoiding it. I know I'm avoiding it. And yet, anything important I need to know, people tell me. They just come and tell me out of the blue, or I get a text. So it's been some tough times, and I like to start with a little levity. So if I, with your permission or without, I like to tell a little joke. So there's a drunk, and he stumbles upon a baptismal service on a Sunday afternoon down by the river. And he proceeds to walk down to the water and stand next to the preacher. And the minister turns to him, notices the man, and says, and the drunk says to him, "Mister, are you ready to find Jesus?" The minister says to the drunk, and the drunk looks back at him and says, "Yes, preacher, I sure am." So the minister dunks the fellow's head right into the water, pulls him up, and says, "Have you found Jesus?" And the drunk says, "Nope, I didn't." So the preacher dunks him in quite a bit longer, pulls him up, and says, "Now, brother, have you found Jesus?" "No, I didn't, Reverend," he responds. So in disgust, the preacher takes the man and holds him down for 30 seconds, brings him up out of the water, and in a harsh tone says, "My good man, have you found Jesus yet?" The old drunk wipes his eyes and asks the preacher, "Are you sure this is where he fell in?" That's one of my favorite jokes. I belly laughed when I read that one, so I hope you did too. So, the inner edge that we're talking about is when we come to that edge where we just start to show up as something different. You ever meet somebody who's kind of edgy, who can feel the tension in their energy, and they might be quick with their responses or sharp with their words, or you just feel like if you add one more thing, they're going to explode, like they're on the edge of their civility with you. I met my own inner edge back in December, well, actually January. I was preparing for our annual meeting here at the center, and we have some big fiscal challenges. We have about 4 years to turn around before our reserves are exhausted. And so I was doing 4-year projections. I was doing this big slide presentation. I was trying to get my talk written. I also had a workshop to complete that week. And then I had one board member just spring on me, a new one who was going to get voted on, say, "Oh, I can't be at the annual meeting." And that's where we do the vote. And I'm like, ah. And then I had another new candidating board member say that they didn't want certain things to happen. They didn't want to be on camera. And then I went over the edge. I went over the edge. I lost a little of my spirituality, and I text something back short. You ever do it and you go, "Oh, I probably should have said that right." And and I say this because I've been in this a long time. I mean, I was raised in science of mind. I understand the crazy brain and the sane brain, and yet I still went over my own edge. And so I think there's always growth in this area because we're kind of fighting our nervous system biology to stay more centered. And it doesn't always have to be a fight. There are some things that we can do to be in harmony. By the way, I did do amends with the person I sent the text to, so we're all good now. So this opportunity to respond versus react, and part of this is to be able to suspend judgment. And that's hard because we got to work against our biology to suspend judgment because we do what's called snap judgments. Snap judgments. Have you ever been walking down a street? Maybe it's getting a little dark at night and you see a figure coming. Right away, your nervous system's going safe, not safe. In fact, the mind will scan the environment 5 times a second subconsciously, safe, not safe, in 1 second. And that's why we have this system of snap judgments. And then we start reacting to this image in the distance. It could be our best friend, but we don't know, right? Because we're survival based. We're already creating a judgment. And we got to be able to pick up on those so that we can step in to our ability to choose kindness, to suspend judgment, to get more information. Because there are moments in life that will place us on these edges. And not all of them are dramatic. Most of them are much quieter. They're the moments just before our reaction, the moments before we harden, the moments before we feel justified in our righteous indignation, right? And that moment is an opportunity to suspend our judgment and to lean in with curiosity and to gain understanding. Because when we can lean in with curiosity and we can gain understanding, we can get to the bridge of compassion. And that's the energy that changes hearts. See, we got a heart problem. We don't have a head problem, we have a heart problem. Because when we remember our humanity, we are in our hearts. And that's what's going to get us to reach beyond our judgments, our right or wrongs, all the things that we create in our heads about other people. I love what Carl Jung says. Carl Jung says, when we understand the wounds behind the behavior, judgments soften and compassion begins. That's where we got to get to. And it's hard to have compassion for what we don't understand. I'm a ADD person, attention divinely divided. Anybody in my camp, ADD? And there's 5 criteria that have to be met for me to do anything. And the acronym is INCUP. It's 5 letters, INCUP, INCUP. Something has to be innovative for me to get enough dopamine to do it, or it has to be novel, or it has to be challenging, or it has to be urgent, or it has to be personal. If I don't get this done for you, I'm going to let you down. Those 5 criteria. Then I can find the dopamine to do the thing. So I have a really hard time doing paperwork or filing things, right? Like they're not innovative, novel, jump, right? And yet to some people, I can look a certain way, right? I get judged sometimes because the filing isn't quite a certain way. But if you understood that my nervous system and the way my brain works is this way, we can get a little more compassion for that. Some things that are easy for people are like kryptonite for me to try to do. So, when we don't take the time to gain understanding, this is really important to hear. Judgment becomes the placeholder for our ignorance. We just fill in the gaps. That's what our mind does. Our mind deletes, distorts, and generalizes. That's all the brain does, by the way. So it's not a really perfect mechanism. It works on shortcuts. And what happens when we do shortcuts? We make mistakes. We don't get it all. And then that's when judgment can rush in. And judgment's very different from discernment, by the way. Discernment is really holding the space for all things to be true and doing your due diligence of understanding to come to a conclusion. Judgment is just cheap discernment without doing your homework. And so we have to wonder, sometimes I wonder what's more damaging, the person doing wounding behavior or the judgment made in ignorance. I don't know. Guess I'll leave that up to you. So today we're going to talk about somebody who sought understanding in one of the most brave and dramatic ways I think a person could. I want you to imagine you go to a gathering. You've been invited to this gathering of people, all kinds of strong and powerful people. And all they want is for people like you to be off the planet. You signed up to go to this gathering, by the way, and you knew that these people would look at you and just think, I wish you weren't on the planet. Can you imagine that? You know who did that? You might have heard of him. Daryl Davis. Who's heard of Daryl Davis? No? Oh, good. Juicy. Whole movie made about his story. See, in 1983, Daryl was a musician and he was playing piano at a piano bar in Frederick, Maryland. And during his set, a white man approached him and said, "You're the best piano player I've ever heard." And then he added, "I've never heard a black man play like that." That one sentence carried a whole tsunami of pain and ignorance. Daryl later felt an instant surge, a tightening of his body, a heat rising. Anybody ever feel that heat rising? You can feel that anger, right? That's exactly what was happening to him. And he said he could have corrected the man sharply. He could have walked away. He could have returned the contempt for contempt. But instead, he paused. And in that pause, he was right on his edge, that emotional edge. It's not moral, it's not logical. And often we frame the edge as a moral issue, but neuroscience will tell us that judgment, this is important, is usually a stress response, not a character flaw. And when the brain senses a threat, social, emotional, or physical, the amygdala, which is right here somewhere, I call it the crazy brain, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, activates. Blood shifts away from your sane brain and it moves back here, right? And so when we're in this brain and we're not in our sane brain, which is responsible for empathy, perspective, choice, right? We're not going to make a lot of good decisions here. So if you know you're here, don't say anything here or here. Just don't do it. It won't come out well. So in simple terms, when we're overwhelmed, we lose our higher thinking. Because contempt, it's protective. Indifference is efficient. Kindness requires regulation so we can stay here. See, Daryl didn't deny the heat rising and the tensing of the body. He didn't try to bypass it. He stayed present. Stayed present with his uncomfortability. Present. When we're present, we're here. So he could choose differently. And he chose from a space of emotional strength. And that's when our spirituality gets tested. When the blood's trying to go back here, staying present here. In fact, a good way to stay present is to name the feeling, name it out loud. I'm feeling tense. I'm feeling anxious. As soon as you're using words, you can stay here. Verbalize the feeling. So Daryl decided to ask the man a question as he was staying present, leaning in with curiosity. He said, "How can you hate me when you don't even know me?" The man answered honestly. He said, "I'm a member of the KKK." See, this is not a theoretical problem, spiritual problem. It's not a safe, comfortable moment. It's the edge in its rawest form. Two people showing themselves honestly. And yet Daryl stayed in the conversation and he refused to be dehumanized. You know, Jesus said, you have to love thy neighbor and love thy enemies, right? Love thy enemies. Why? Because we can't get to the bridge of understanding, unity, oneness, and the kingdom of heaven within if we don't. When we're carrying hate or upset on the inside. It's it's this standing on the edge, holding the tension of opposites. It's radical emotional discipline that we're shooting for, or red. So when you see red, go red. Radical emotional discipline. Right? That's where you want to go. Ernest Holmes echoed this truth when he said, we cannot react against a condition and at the same time rise above it. Can't react against a condition and at the same time rise above it because it's your low thinking brain here in control. And to rise above, we got to be here. We got to be in our higher thinking. See, Daryl didn't try to defeat the hatred. He refused to match its frequency. Have you ever got drawn into somebody's drama, somebody's low energy frequency, and then you're walking out the room like this? Right? It's catching. You know, even in scientific research, there's something called contact theory that shows that sustained humanizing interactions across differences reduces prejudice and extremist thinking, right? Just being in each other's presence. And the nervous system relaxes when threat becomes relationship. That's why we got to love thy neighbor. Otherwise, we're seeing threats and our nervous system is on edge. You know, over time, Daryl formed a genuine friendship with people in the extremist group. He did. In fact, it's an interesting story how he met the Grand Wizard. He had reached out to the Grand Wizard and asked to meet him at a neutral location. So it happened to be this hotel room. And Daryl's wife had packed up a cooler full of sandwiches and some drinks. And what do you put in coolers? You put ice in coolers. And this is important because when the Grand Wizard came through the door, he came through with his bodyguard, and there was this tension in the room. And just as they're in the room and the cooler is there and the ice is melting, the ice popped and they heard this pop. And then there was this tension and they were wondering, was it a gun? What was it? It was the ice. Now, thankfully, no one got shot that day. And they had a conversation and they started to talk more and more and more. And one day, the Grand Wizard invited him to a KKK rally. Daryl said yes. Can you imagine that? He said yes. I'm not sure what all Daryl learned at the rally or if even anybody gave him a drink of water. I don't know. But there was a deep friendship that followed between the Grand Wizard and Daryl. So much so that the Grand Wizard one day mailed him his Grand Wizard robe and quit the KKK. And what Daryl learned was that you can't hate somebody you know, that you connect with. See, it wasn't just persuasion that Daryl used. He didn't persuade anybody to do anything. It was coherence. Daryl held a different consciousness in the room, and it changed the field between him and the person he was with. See, emotional strength is spiritual maturity. But I want to be clear. Kindness is not passivity. It does not mean agreement. And it doesn't mean self-erasure, right? Kindness is self-mastery, where two things can be true, right? Daryl was in the midst of someone who preached hatred and extermination against people like him. But at the same time, the Grand Wizard had a heart and was human. Ernest Holmes wrote, the highest form of thought is that which recognizes unity while honoring individuality. See, that's our work. Daryl honored his own dignity and humanity of the other. See, anyone can judge. We can all judge. It's easy, right? Anyone could dismiss the other that hurt them. But it takes strength to stay open when our body wants to armor up, right? That's the inner edge. So what you do matters. Recognize it and pause before you act. And this matters, I think, now more than ever. In a world where we're so polarized, we're so divided, we're so being almost baited to judge one another, to exclude one another. There's a whole tsunami. I don't know if you've heard of this trend of kids disowning their parents. Anyone hear about that trend? Yeah. Kids disowning their parents? My God, the people that know them the best on the planet, right? It's all this heightened reactivity that people are making decisions from, the not so good thinking space. And now there's this chronic nervous system overload. And social media is reinforcing it. You got to be careful what you let in here and what you let in here. It's in training our nervous systems. The jokes, right? I don't even like the jokes because they have an undercurrent of this, the labeling, the stories, the sensationalism. I mean, I remember when news accurately reflected the weather. Now there's a few raindrops, and before the raindrops come, big storm coming. Like we should all go buy supplies, and then it's just like a regular storm. Anyone notice that? Like it's just always trying to inflame and trigger and get us going. And now we're getting kind of nervous system fatigue, almost to where we don't respond anymore, where there's this indifference. Can't change it. What am I going to do? And yet Spirit calls us to something deeper. I think this is why Jesus said, blessed are the peacekeepers. The peacemakers, not the peacekeepers, the peacemakers. Because anyone who's doing peacemaking, they're triggered too. Their nervous system is feeling that edge. See, anyone who can stand on the edge of all of this chaos and uncomfortability can remain in their humanity. Because humanity will respond to injustice. Humanity will rise up to right the wrongs, to heal, to love, to find the kindness, to choose the kindness, which is choosing our freedom. We're all cells in a body called humanity. And when we can be kind to all the cells can be free. And we're one of them, and we're part of it. Daryl said, when you don't know someone, fear fills the gap. When you know someone, fear has nowhere to live. Isn't that a great saying? When you know someone, fear has nowhere to live. See, judgment would have cost him energy. Contempt would have hardened him. Indifference wouldn't have changed anything. But kindness freed Daryl And it freed so many others who were trapped in hate. He went on to do this work to free hundreds of people in the KKK, turning in their robes, turning in their cards, and walking away. And metaphysically speaking, this is the law at work. What we hold in consciousness becomes the quality of our experience. What you pay attention to is the experience you're buying. Contempt contracts, kindness expands. Not because others deserve it, but because we do. So the next time judgment arises, pause and ask, what am I protecting right now? I was in the coffee shop line, and it was like four people in front of me, and there was one couple at the very front, and they were just taking their time. And they were just kind of like, oh, I don't know, let me look at the pastries. And like nobody was behind them. You should have heard all the thoughts in my brain. All of my BS, my belief system was popping up. How rude. Can't they think of other people? They really should just make a decision. Right. What was I protecting? And I just lost, 3 minutes apiece because I wasn't choosing kindness. Perception doesn't show us reality, right? It shows us our inner lens. What's in our lens of what's coming through, what's in the lens, because the lens is going to shape it. And we want to remain congruent. We always want to remain in alignment with our belief system. So it's important to pay attention. What am I protecting? Why am I having these thoughts of judgment? Right? There's something in my lens, some belief system that I'm applying to them. So I want to offer you this truth. Ask yourself, am I strong enough to stay open when I feel like I want to shut down or protect or come at people? Because the pause is almost like a prayer. It's a choice, it's a practice, it's the moment that opens us mentally and energetically to see something beyond our lens. And we need to see and know a deeper truth of our oneness now more than ever, or we'll keep trying to divide something that can't be divided. And that's where the pain is. Think about your body. And if your right hand had a judgment about your left hand, if you're right-handed, you're so useless, we'll just cut you off. That would hurt because it's one body. That's the pain we feel when we feel the division and the pulling of somebody pulling away. It's something that is a demonstration of our oneness. So if you do hold division in your heart, I invite you to embrace that inner edge and start questioning what you think you know and engage in curiosity. I call it leaning in and hugging the porcupine. Anybody ever lean in and hug the porcupine? Right? And here's the thing, I've hugged a lot of porcupines. Daryl hugged a porcupine. Their quills drop off and you find the softness underneath it. And when we can hug with this idea of oneness, with the looking for common ground, we can see a higher truth. Because we all want that common ground. And then we can shift to peace. Then we can shift to love. Then we can shift to understanding. I imagine some of the talks between Daryl and the Grand Wizard. I mean, maybe they both liked baseball. I don't know. There was some common ground there. And when we can stand on it, we can grow it. And we can create the understanding for the world that we really want to live in. I believe it's possible. I invite you to lean in with curiosity, be brave, and find out whose heart you can find behind all that otherness that you see in someone else. It just might heal you and them. Blessed be. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hmm.
Thank you, Mitch. Boy, have you got a lot of things for me to think about. You were coming one after the other. I couldn't get them all written down in time.
Good thing it's recorded.
That's right. I'm going to have to listen to you again and again. For me, my inner edge is the limit of my spiritual development. It's the edge of my
Mm,
acceptance of what is. It's the edge of my becoming where I want to go.
mhm,
And it is so hard, like you say, it's so hard to avoid the reactivity and the impulse to judge and separate and make, wrong your right, that sort of
mhm,
thing.
mhm,
But it is unifying if you can do that, if you can just try to understand and accept as it is,
mhm.
rather than having to try to be in control of it somehow. Thank you so much for your perspectives. They are very inspiring and
Oh,
thought-provoking, and I'm glad you're with us.
oh, thank you. Thank you.